Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister. I'm a contributor with Red State, and I am my dad's third favorite conservative to talk on this show, which should probably be something I bring up with my therapist because it says something about my relationship with my dad. But let me bring in his first favorite and second favorite conservative on this show. First, the lady to the bottom in the left who's smiling because she knows that she's always number one in everybody's heart. That's Kira Davis, editor-at-large of Red State. How are you doing today, ma'am?
I am doing great. Thank you, Lenny's dad. Thank you for making me your favorite. I promise I will not disappoint you, as Lenny probably has many times in his life.
Kira, say one more thing like that over the course of this show, and I promise you, you will pay for the next therapy session. Now, the other person that's on this show that happens to be in Texas because he lives there versus the person that's visiting there every now and then is the dude in a hat from Austin, the heart of Texas, Jeff Charles, who always finds a way to be late for the show, but always be right on time with his comments. Jeff, hello.
Hello. I'm trying to figure out how I can get to be your dad's favorite, but then when I realize that the competition is Kira Davis, I know I don't have a chance, so I'm just going to be good where I'm at right now.
You know what you probably need to do, Jeff, in order to win that prestiged honor? You probably need to go into a corner and wait for it, Kira. Go and just listen to yourself. Did you like that?
Lenny, I like it. I like how you think. Just Listen to Yourself is the name of my podcast. And with the way the news cycle is going lately, I feel like I'm saying that like literally every day. Just listen to yourself.
You know what? And it's a fantastic podcast. And look, I'm almost like the angel off of, what's the name of the movie? Oh my gosh. Now
Angel in the Outfield?
No, not Angels in the Outfield. The old movie with, where the dude was going to jump off the bridge and had the angel and got his wings.
It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. It's almost kind of like that here on Red and Black, where I get my proverbial wings every time I pitch Kira's podcast and I say something about a breaking Conservatarian, except for the fact that I don't get wings and they still insult me throughout the course of this show. But I digress. I still love doing it with them anyway. I do want to talk to you two about this today because we're sitting here in 2020. It's a very unique year. We all know this. But over the course of this time together, I want to bounce off of you this question. What's going to be the lasting impact of this year between a presidential election, a pandemic, a recession, the racial tensions, everything else? And Kira, I'm going to go to you first on this. We're getting towards the end of 2020, and people look back at very key years, 1861, 1865 with the assassination of Lincoln and the end of the Civil War. They did a series on CNN about 1968. I have to imagine that people will talk about 2020 in the same exact way moving forward. Kira, what's going to be the lasting impact of all of this, whether it's politics, society, whatever? If you had to give a guess right now for your time capsule, what's your first guess?
I wouldn't even dare to guess, Lenny, because 2020 has been the most incredible and insane year I think that any of us could have ever imagined. And to be honest with you, as a nerd who is really into statistics and numbers and demographics, I'm fascinated to see how some of this stuff is going to pan out when we're 5-10 years down the road. I don't think we're really going to start to feel the effects of what 2020 has done to this country and to the children of this country for quite a few years. I'll give you an example. Our son graduated high school last year, and in that weirdness when we all went to online schooling and we thought, okay, we'll get through the summer and I'll go to college, and that didn't happen. College didn't open. And now we find out college isn't really going to open for the rest of the 2020, 2021 school year. Now here is a kid, and he's probably representative of tens of thousands of college students, who has now lost over a year of his life, applications and loan applications and all of that stuff that goes into finding college. That year is gone. And it's not a gap year. He's not traveling and doing something fun like that. And so this is really going to affect what his future looks like. We have no idea what that's going to look like. I will tell you this. I think one of my biggest hopes, and I'm saying this as somebody who is right in the middle of this sending a kid off to college phase. So this is where my heart's at right now. I think maybe one of the things we're going to see is a dramatic shift in how we view higher education. I think there's a lot of schools, some schools are open, but most of them are online, and they're not discounting their rates. I know our school refused to discount their rates for online service, and he goes to an elite college. And so I think what we're going to see is a lot of parents reevaluating and children reevaluating what is the value of higher education, and what exactly are they giving you for all this money? And by the way, where does all this money go? When, do you need to pay $70,000 a year for your child to study women's studies or English or underwater basket weaving or whatever it is they're studying? I think we're going to see a real shift back to a time when education really wasn't about the prestige of the degree, but rather, do you need this to get to the next step of your life? I've met a few kids in Texas as I've been traveling around the last few months, a few weeks, and they are kids who have decided not to go to college and instead have gone right to trades. And I think we're going to see more of that. And they're working and earning already, even in a pandemic. So I think
that's one of the interesting
for me,
things,
that's
Kara,
where it's going to be really interesting.
That's one thing in just education. But Jeff, let me pull you into this, because Kara brings up a very interesting point. She brings up just the academic aspect of this, but let's talk about the societal aspect. She mentioned that we may not know for years in advance. And it makes me go back to, I mentioned 1968, and Jeff, I'll bounce this off of you and then back to Kara. She brings up a good point. Years down the road, we didn't even see all the impact of 1968, and that was with a year that had the assassination of both MLK and RFK. Guess what happened 6 years later, where we bottomed out even further still as a country? 1974, the resignation of the President of the United States. So even some of the social decay of our civic esteem could go even further past the pandemic, past the recession, to a point of time where we go even lower. If you had to put something into a time capsule right now, Jeff, what do you think the initial thoughts you would have in regards to the long-lasting impact of 2020 might be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this year will go down in the history books, right? You've already mentioned the pandemic. You've mentioned the president has gotten a serious virus. We've got the nationwide civil unrest. But what I think is really the impact that I think is going to happen is with our elections and confidence in our elections. Because right now, I mean, I've predicted this before, and I'm predicting it again. This election will be contested. And the last time we had one of these was about 20 years ago. But this situation is different because it seems like it's already being contested before it even happens. You know, on the left, you've already got people talking about voter suppression. You've already talked about you've already seen people talking about voters not showing up to the polls because of the virus. On the other side, you've got the right talking about voter fraud already stating that it's happening and that it's going to influence the presidential election, despite the protestations of the experts who say that this can't happen, at least not at the presidential level. So when this thing is contested, I'm wondering. I'm saying that it could impact future elections, maybe midterms, but certainly presidential level elections, where both parties are going to basically accuse the other side of cheating if and when they lose. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but I mean, we're already seeing the groundwork being laid, and if it's happening now, why couldn't it happen again in another 4 years?
All right, but Jeff, does that mean that the bounce back is going to make us better, or does that mean we're going to continue to bounce and go lower? Because to your point, we could be skeptical, going to your point in regards to elections, but it make us better in regards to the voter availability, making sure the votes are valid, making sure that we allow people to have enough time to have a fair and thorough election. At the same exact time, because of the influence of social media, Jeff, the flip side is every election is contested. Every dog catcher election, every mayoral election, you can throw the country into chaos if you say the mayoral election in Chicago and New York are going to be up for grabs every 4 years. That's enough to have an impact nationally, let alone the presidential elections.
Yeah, that's true. And I could see getting there too. I mean, down to the state and local levels. I'm not really convinced that it's going to go that far just yet. But at least when it comes to the presidency and maybe even other federal offices as well, like senators, representatives, it could spread to that as well. But you also bring up a good point about making it easier for people to vote. I think it's showing people that maybe they should have already been taking this seriously. It's showing the government that they should have already been putting something like this into place instead of having to rush it all together because of a pandemic that nobody expected to happen. So it could go either way. I mean, it could go both ways. I mean, both of those things that you just said could happen. But either way, I think it is going to have an impact on future elections.
Karen, let me go a little higher level. I want to go back to a point that you brought up earlier in regards to we don't know what the long-term impact of this year is going to be. People also forget that later on in the 1970s, there was a crisis of confidence that another sitting president famously discussed in regards to what America was going through. Are we going through that crisis of confidence now, or do you feel as though we're finding our footing despite all the tension that we're starting to have, or not even starting to have, that we're continuing to have in 2020?
In some ways, I do believe that history repeats itself, but in other ways, I do think we're in an extremely unique time. And that's thanks in no small part to the technological advancements that we're availing ourselves of even in this very moment. Social media and how we connect, all of that is different. I feel like maybe some people will call me naive or overly optimistic, but I have been personally deeply affected by 2020 just as a mother, and my heart and my mind are thinking about this all the time. And I genuinely believe that some really interesting and positive things are going to come out of this eventually. Again, to answer your original question, I don't know how long that takes. I don't know when we see it. But even if you look to 1968, it took us a while to loop back around, but then we had the 80s and 90s, which were the most prosperous years of this country's development. So I definitely believe that America is not finished yet, not finished growing yet, not finished being better. There's going to be some silver linings here. The education bubble, I think, is one of those silver linings. I think one of the other silver linings that I'm beginning to see is a lot of people are tiring of the vitriol and the divide. And I'm seeing more and more people wanting to find some kind of middle. So when we're done with this era, however long it lasts, if it lasts the next year or the next 4 years, when we're done with this era, I think we're going to have a nice cross-section of people who are wanting to hit the reset button, who are wanting to get back to some kind of diplomacy, to some kind of agreement that, hey, we're all neighbors, we disagree, but your politics don't inform your personality. I'm seeing that. How long it'll take, how powerful it will be, I don't know. But the education bubble, that's a big thing for me. That's actually going to be a huge thing for America, because I think there's a good argument to be made that one of the reasons we're in the situation that we're in now is because of the way we've been educating children for the last 30 or 40 years. So for education to take a deep shift, we may see a huge shift away from the idea of public education, or what public education is, or who can avail themselves of public education and where. Even a tiny shift in that direction. I mean, I think we're looking at 10% or something, 10 to 12% of the country kind of switching to homeschooling during this pandemic.
Yes,
That's all
exactly.
you need. That's all you need for a dramatic shift in education. And again, as we said before, you're not going to see those results till those kids are a little bit older, but it's going to be interesting.
You're right, Kira, but you take the fact that education drives so much debt in our country as well. If you shift that dynamic and there's value given back to kids going to high school, finding a career, and not getting into hundreds of thousands of debt when it comes to college, that can shift how the economy is going moving forward. Now, you gave me some hope, and I want to get into one other topic before we go, because you gave me hope by saying that maybe there'll be a middle and people will appreciate the middle and some political balance once again, which, by the way, Kira, that means that gives me a shot for me moving up my dad's list, and I might eventually get to number one on this list. So don't get too comfortable up there. But
we'll see.
One thing, well, we have to fight, and I'm just letting you know, fair warning.
We'll work it out at Christmas.
You know, look, I have the advantage of being his namesake. You have the advantage of actually being good at this. So we have our advantages. But one thing I do want to talk about, you brought up things shifting. We've seen a shift in how we view what the presidency is supposed to be in the United States. Now, of course, every single person that takes this office puts their prints all over what the office looks like. And we just had a president in Barack Obama that changed the imagery of what the presidency could and should be. But Donald Trump has obviously done it in a way that's going to be long lasting. There probably is not going to be another American president like him. Jeff, I'm going to start with you. I know we can talk about this for 2 hours, but again, if you put it in a time capsule, how would you describe how Donald Trump has changed the American presidency moving forward? Not the Trump presidency, but how Trump has changed the institution of the presidency.
You know, I've wondered about that. And, part of me wonders if he even changed it at all, or if it'll just go back to normal, after he's gone, whether it's this year or in 2024. Because he is an anomaly. I mean, we haven't seen anybody like him. I don't think that obviously we're never going to get another Trump type of figure, but one of the lasting impressions that he could leave on the office of the presidency is when it comes to that bully pulpit, the aggressiveness. Trump isn't necessarily one of a kind in that respect because, Obama could be aggressive too. He was just smoother with it.
Teddy
thing
Roosevelt
with Bush, same thing with past presidents.
Talked about carrying a big stick. We can go from
right.
FDR tried to pack the courts. You know, there are plenty of examples of people that, Reagan fired thousands of people over the air controller strike. So there are presidents that have used that as a bully pulpit and gone further. But to your point about Trump.
Yeah, they did all those things. But what's interesting is that I'm not going to say they were nice about it, but had that been Trump, he would have done that and had a lot to say about it too that a lot of people wouldn't have liked. So he has a lot more of a boisterous, bellicose personality, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of that seeps into future presidencies. Again, it may not be to the extent that Trump does it, but I can see either party electing a figure who is more aggressive in that language. I'm not sure what kind of impact that'll have on society and on our government, but other than that, I think that's really what we might see going forward.
But can you have that and go back to Kira's middle, like she brought up previously? If you're going to have people that are more forceful from the edges, it almost seems to contravene what Kira said, which is we're going to get back to an era where we find a middle again. Are we going to be able to have that forceful presence and get back to the middle? Do they do it through social media? Do they do it through traditional media? Or are we just maybe not going towards the era of the middle quite yet?
I actually agree with Kira because I think that there are a lot of people who really do want a return to American political discourse like we've had it in the past. Americans don't have a problem with political discourse. We don't have a problem with agreement, debate. We don't even have a problem with heated debate. But I think most Americans do have a problem with a lot of the animus and a lot of the animosity that we're seeing out there nowadays. And like Kira said, people are getting sick of it. Our media apparatus and our politicians have a vested interest in keeping that going, but how much longer will they be able to do it? I'm hoping that if Trump does have that impact on the presidency, that we finally see that the presidency shouldn't be as important as we've made it. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't know if that'll actually happen.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we've become fixated on that office. And I don't know when it happened. It was probably before I was born. But this is not a monarchy. It's a republic. Well, yeah,
Education
yeah,
happened.
yeah,
Yeah, what
yep.
happened was we stopped educating our kids in civics. And so when you raise 3, 4, 5 generations of kids who don't understand the 3 branches of government, who's supposed to be the weakest branch, how your local government works, what the Supreme Court is supposed to do versus what they do now. I mean, this is why I say the education sector, when that shifts, it's going to have a dramatic impact on these conversations we're having. I also want to say this, Jeff, I agree with everything you said, but one of the things to speak to Lenny's question about what about this middle here? Well, this is another interesting development with technology, how this is what makes us a little bit different from, say, a 1968. We no longer have to depend on a corporate media to feed us our conversation and messages. Shows like this is like exactly the kind of thing that's going to change the landscape, because now what's happening is people are going out and they're looking to find their own commentary. They're looking to find people who speak to them, who they feel comfortable listening to. They don't necessarily want to sit down and watch Fox News or CNN anymore. It's the same thing every night. And because technology has leveled the playing field and given us all access to an audience, people like us can go out there for very little cost, for very little effort, and have our voices heard. And we have a platform. This is another reason why I think we see so much angst in the legacy or corporate media, as I like to call them. We see so much angst. I think they don't like the competition. And so you have to keep being more and more outrageous so that you keep people tuned in. But what I'm seeing is fatigue. I'm seeing outrage fatigue. And I'm not saying that it's going to change next month or even next year. But I definitely believe that we are in for a culture shift, and my opinion is that it's going to be a good one. We just got to slog through some weirdness here for a while. And those of us who are reasonable and wanting to keep the dialogue open and wanting to see this country be bigger and better and greater than ever, we need to hold the line while everybody else figures this out. You know, I mean, to coin a cliche that we've been hearing over and over again in 2020, we're all in this together. And we are all in this together. At the end of the day, every American is your neighbor.
Well,
We've got to slog through this together.
I thought the cliche that you were going to bring up was where your conservatism is not just the color that you used to. You pitched the show, and then you didn't go to my tagline. Kara, why am I paying you over there?
That's your job. That's your job, Lenny. That's your job. I'm just the pretty face.
Jeff, review the contract. Jeff
I
probably
thought I was a
agree
pretty
with you
face.
anyway. Because part of the contract
Sorry.
is he's supposed to agree with you all the time either way. But Kara, you bring up a point before we go. There's a role for us to hang in there and slog through some of this. I believe in America. I know you do, Kara. I know you do, Jeff. And those of you out there as well that are joining us here in Red and Black, we appreciate you being here. Kara, talk a little bit about Just Listen to Yourself and the Kara Davis Show real quick before we go.
The Kira Davis Show is my podcast over at Red State, and you can become a VIP member at Red State and tune in. And that's a really political show, so that's kind of the red meat show. But my bread and butter is Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis. That's available wherever you find your podcast, and that is a podcast that is aimed at just what I just talked about: finding the middle, seeing both sides. I'm a conservative. I don't hide that. But I'm also, I want us to get to a place where we can dialogue, where we can think critically about our points, where we all know what we believe, and that will make us more confident as we move forward with these political conversations. And then they don't have to feel so personal, because we're not so invested in making someone be right. We're just having interesting conversations. So join me over there. Just Listen to Yourself, and that's available wherever you find your podcasts.
Mr. Breaking Conservatarian, ready, set, go.
Yeah, you know, check out my Breaking Conservatarian podcast and YouTube channel. I am on the right, just like Kira. I'm a conservative, but we try to look at things from more of a nuanced angle rather than just relying on a lot of the talking points that you hear on our side and on the other side as well. What I've started to do is I'm starting to have a lot of guests lined up to interview them, talk to them about what they're doing. I talked to somebody running for city council in Baltimore, and I've got some other people on tap. So really what we're going to be doing is encouraging rational, nuanced, and fun conversations about the issues that are going on in American politics today.
The beautiful thing about working with these wonderful people here on Red and Black is the fact that we go after the truth, not the filtered truth. And Kira brought up the point about corporate legacy media. Filtered truth is oftentimes a half-truth. It's the truth that's going to sell just enough to the audience. We're here because we know that the unfiltered, true truth that is done in a way with class and dignity and inspiration allows us to be a better America. Red and Black is where we do that, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to, but the conversations are also fun, engaging, fast-moving, and I still have to pay Kira for complimenting her during this show. So anywho, make sure, there you go. Make sure you join us, Jeff Charles, Kira Davis, himself, Lenny McAllister. We usually have a fourth here, but not for this episode, but you will see us mix it up all the time here on Red and Black. In the meanwhile, we'll talk to you soon. Have a wonderful day. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.